Welcome, dear students. The current session is based on a summary of the characteristics of English during 1650 and 1800. And the objective of the session is to give you a quick summary of the characteristics of this period. Well, my dear students, supporters of rational science such as Henry Moore, Thomas Pratt, John Wilkins, and Robert Boyle were quite disturbed by the ranting language of the enthusiast. You know, the impact that Renaissance had on the language, in terms of, excessive inclusion of vocabulary, in terms of freedom of choices in structures, all the borrowings that happened during this period, and the individual choices, how they affected. Also, the kind of creativity and, the use of a noun, for instance, as a verb, or of a verb as an adverb, of an adverb as an adjective, etc. All this creativity and, these choices that, were not as such standardized, they were disturbing these people. The second important characteristic of the age is that why this all was now happening, the discourse of learning, the learned discourse, the books, the texts, education, all this was not limited to the upper class only. It was seeping down to the lower class. It was coming down to the masses. Now masses were being elevated in all this social context, and they could also get education. So books were being extensively published, and a lot of, stuff written in English was available. Language, it was urged in 18th century that should be geared for rational and literary prosaic discourse. Why? Because it was felt that under that, impulse of, creativity and the willingness and the desire to adventure and the vigor for exploration during the Renaissance, so much had been added to the language that, there were so many uses that these 18th century grammarians and the linguists thought were illogical and that they were spoiling the language. It was also recommended in this period that the language in the liberal arts should be brought closer in contact with the pure mechanic arts. Why? Because what they were suggesting was the main feature of the times was the desire to bring simplicity to language, to make it kind of what we can say clean. In this way, English prose they thought, it could facilitate a national unity built around scientific honesty and social utility. So, the desire for rationality, the faith in science, the use of logic, these were the important characteristics of the times. If we look at how all this happened, we need to slightly go back and look at the impact of the 17th century that actually came through the Royal Society, that served as a kind of a cleaning house for the language, particularly the language that was being used in the scientific endeavors. Now, moving from there, what happened in the 18th century, the first half was, generally designated, in the history of English language, it is called Augustan Age. This age is characterized with the search for stability, as a reaction to, every action has a reaction, this is what we say. So as a reaction to what happened in Renaissance period, there was a desire for stability. They wanted to fix the language. One of the first characteristics to be mentioned is a strong sense of order and the value for recognition. For, restructuring it, for giving it a form and a shape, and for, regularizing it, they needed a model, and Latin was looked at as a model. In fact, classical precedent was often generalized, and it was applied to, the totality of English language. first attention was turned to the grammar. And when the Latin language was used as a model, what happened? Irrespective of the differences that are inherent in English and, between English and, Latin language, the rules were applied on English language, and efforts were made to explain the grammar of English language with the help of Latin grammar. In the 18th century, also there was a desire to give the English language a polished, rational, and permanent form. People like Swift, they opposed the unchecked entry of words through individuals into the language. They were against all that. During the process, certain formal steps were taken. The desire to establish an English academy emerged. There were certain objections to it. Substitutions were given. Publication of, a dictionary of the English language, the first dictionary in 1755, was a milestone. Overall, all this period from 1650 to 1800 was a period of, a lot of changes. It was a very happening period in terms of language development.